My family called me a disgrace at my brother's promotion party, until his CEO walked in, shook my hand, and revealed I own the company that just promoted him. What happened next destroyed 20 years of family lies. Standing in the corner of the Martinez family home, nursing my third glass of cheap wine, I watched my brother Carlos beam like he'd just discovered fire. The whole family clustered around him, hanging on every word about his big promotion at Martinez Industries. Mom kept dabbing her eyes with pride. Dad kept clapping Carlos on the back, and I kept wondering why I even bothered showing up. Look at Carlos, he's finally making something of himself, Mom announced to the room, her voice carrying that familiar edge whenever she looked in my direction. Why can't you be more like him, Rebecca? The question hit like a slap, but I'd been expecting it. At 32, I was still the family disappointment. The one who never applied herself. The one who wasted her potential. The one who somehow managed to embarrass them just by existing. Maybe now you'll learn what real success looks like, Carlos said, raising his beer toward me with that smirk I'd known since childhood. The one that said he was the golden child and I was just the mistake they kept around out of obligation. Dad joined in, because of course he did. Rebecca, when are you going to stop playing around and get a real job? Your brother's showing you how it's done. I took another sip of wine and nodded politely. They had no idea that in 30 minutes their entire world would collapse around them. But I did, because I'd been planning this moment for 5 years. See what my family didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams, was that their disappointment daughter had been living a double life. While they thought I was some aimless freelancer working from my tiny apartment, I'd actually spent the last 5 years quietly building a business empire worth $50 million. It started small, the way these things always do. Tech consulting from my home office, working 18-hour days, while my family assumed I was playing on my computer. I reinvested every penny, bought my first rental property, then another. I had a gift for spotting struggling companies and turning them around. Real estate led to business acquisitions, which led to larger investments, which led to Heritage Corporation. Heritage Corporation. The name meant nothing to my family, but it should have, because Heritage Corporation was the parent company that owned Martinez Industries, the very company where Carlos had just received his big promotion. For 2 years, I'd been his boss, his ultimate boss. The promotion he was celebrating tonight, I'd approved it personally, sitting in my executive office downtown, while he had no idea his failure sister was the one advancing his career. But here's the thing that would destroy them. I'd done it all on purpose. Every strategic decision, every quiet acquisition, every moment I chose. To stay silent while they called me worthless. I wanted to see if they could love me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted to know if my own family was capable of basic human decency without a financial incentive. Tonight had answered that question completely. The doorbell rang, and I felt my pulse quicken, right on time. "I'll get it," I said, but Carlos was already heading toward the door, still playing the gracious host in Mom and Dad's house. I watched him open it to reveal a distinguished man in an expensive suit, Mr. Robert Thompson, CEO of Martinez Industries. Carlos's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Mr. Thompson, I can't believe you came. Mom, Dad, everyone, this is my boss." The family immediately swarmed toward Thompson, like he was visiting royalty. Mom started fussing about not having the good china out. Dad began that awkward small talk he reserved for people he wanted to impress. And Carlos launched into another recap of his career achievements. But Thompson was scanning the room, and when his eyes found mine across the crowded living room, his entire demeanor changed. "Rebecca," he called out, his voice cutting through the family chatter. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The room fell silent. Confused faces turned between Thompson and me as he walked directly toward my corner, ignoring the family's outstretched hands and eager introductions. Mom's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Carlos's face drained of all color as Thompson reached out to shake my hand with obvious familiarity and respect. "Well, if it isn't the owner of Heritage Corporation," Thompson said with a warm smile. "Thank you for the opportunity to lead Martinez Industries under your portfolio. The quarterly reports are looking exceptional." The silence stretched for exactly 5 seconds. 5 seconds where 20 years of family dynamics hung suspended in the air, waiting to crash down and shatter everything they thought they knew about their disappointing daughter. Then the questions exploded. "What do you mean, owner?" Dad stammered. "Rebecca, what is he talking about?" Mom demanded. Carlos just stood frozen, his brain refusing to process what he'd just heard. Thompson looked around the room with growing confusion. "I'm sorry, did I interrupt something? I thought everyone knew about Rebecca's company. Heritage Corporation has been quite successful. We own 15 companies now, including Martinez Industries." "15 companies?" Carlos whispered. "Oh yes," Thompson continued, completely oblivious to the family meltdown happening around him. "Rebecca's been an incredible leader. The strategic investments she's made have transformed our entire portfolio. Carlos, you should be proud. Your sister personally approved your promotion. She speaks very highly of your work." I watched my brother's face cycle through every emotion possible in about 10 seconds. Shock, confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, something that looked like terror. "You've been my boss?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "Ultimate boss, technically," I replied calmly, taking another sip of wine. "Thompson runs day-to-day operations. I handle strategic direction and major decisions." Mom found her voice first, and it came out as a shriek. "Why didn't you tell us?" "When exactly should I have mentioned it?" I asked. "During one of your lectures about my lack of ambition? When you were explaining to relatives how disappointed you were in me? Or maybe during Carlos's last birthday, when you all forgot to invite me?" The room had gone completely silent again, but now I could see other party guests edging closer, sensing drama and wanting to hear every word. "This changes nothing about your behavior," Dad said, his voice shaking with anger and something else, maybe fear. "Family should share these things." "Family?" I repeated slowly. "Like the family that told me I'd never amount to anything? The family that excluded me from holiday photos because I was an embarrassment? The family that literally called me a disgrace 30 minutes ago?" Carlos stepped forward, and I could see him trying to process the implications. "The company's recent success, was that because of you? The 15% growth this quarter? The new client acquisitions? The expansion into digital markets?" I nodded. "All my strategies, all my investments, all my decisions." Thompson was starting to look uncomfortable as he realized he'd walked into a family war zone. Perhaps I should go. No, please stay, I said. I think my family is just beginning to understand who I actually am. Mom tried a different approach, switching to her manipulation voice, the one she used when she wanted something. Honey, we always knew you were special. We were just trying to motivate you. By calling me worthless, by telling everyone I was a failure, by making me feel like I didn't belong in my own family. I set down my wine glass and looked around the room. You want to know the truth? I wanted to see if you could love me for who I am, not what I have. Tonight answered that question. The power dynamics in the room had shifted so completely it was almost visible. The same relatives who'd been ignoring me all evening were now staring with newfound interest. The family friends who'd pitied my parents for having such a disappointing daughter were whispering among themselves, spreading the news that would be all over town by morning. Carlos's professional crisis was written all over his face. Everything he'd accomplished at Martinez Industries was now suspect. Had he earned his position, or was it nepotism? Were his achievements real, or had his sister been pulling strings behind the scenes? I think, I said quietly, we need to have a family conversation in private. 10 minutes later, we were standing in Mom's garden while Thompson made his polite excuses and left. The party continued inside, but everyone kept glancing through the windows, trying to read our body language. Mom started with the guilt trip. We're family, Rebecca. Family should stick together, share their successes. Stop, I interrupted. Just stop. I've spent 5 years documenting this. Every put-down, every exclusion, every time you chose to build Carlos up by tearing me down. I have texts, emails, voicemails. I have a record of every family gathering I wasn't invited to. Every achievement of mine you dismissed. Every time you introduced me to people as your disappointing daughter. Dad tried minimizing. We were just joking around. You know we love you. Love me, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You love the idea of controlling me. You love having someone to blame for your own failures. You love having a scapegoat so Carlos can be your golden child. Carlos finally found his voice. Rebecca, I never knew. You never knew because you never cared to know. When I was struggling to start my business, working 20-hour days, you told people I was playing around with computers. When I bought my first rental property, you said I was wasting money. When I tried to share my small victories, you changed the subject to talk about yourself. Mom switched tactics again, moving to future faking. But now we can be proud of you. Now we understand. Now you understand that I have money, I corrected. That's all this is. You couldn't see my worth when I was building something incredible from nothing. You can only see it now that someone else has validated it for you. The garden fell silent except for the sound of the party continuing inside. Through the windows, I could see people taking pictures, posting on social media, sharing the story that would reshape how everyone in our community saw the Martinez family dynamics. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. I've spent 5 years building something incredible. You've spent 5 years tearing me down. Now you get to choose. Do you want a relationship with who I actually am? Or do you want a relationship with my bank account? The question hung in the air like a challenge, because we all knew the answer. We'd always known the answer. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval to know my worth. "I need time to think," Carlos said finally. "You have all the time you need," I replied. "But understand this, the woman you called a disgrace was always the woman I am today. The only difference is now you can see it too." As I walked back toward the house to collect my purse, I heard Mom whisper to Dad, "How do we fix this?" I paused at the door and looked back. "You start by asking if there's anything left worth fixing." The party was still going when I left, but now every conversation stopped when I walked by. People who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to exchange business cards. The family friends who'd pitied my parents were now asking for my contact information. But none of that mattered anymore, because I'd finally gotten my answer. 20 years of conditional love had taught me everything I needed to know about the Martinez family, and tomorrow I would start building the life I deserved, with or without them. The next morning, I woke up to 47 missed calls and over 200 text messages. The story had spread through our community like wildfire, and everyone wanted a piece of the narrative. Local business leaders were reaching out for partnerships. Acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly my closest friends, and 3 different reporters wanted to write feature stories about my overnight success. But the messages that caught my attention weren't from strangers seeking opportunities. They were from other family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, who'd witnessed years of the Martinez family dynamics and finally felt safe enough to speak their truth. "I always knew you were special," texted my Aunt Maria. "The way they treated you never sat right with me." "You deserved so much better," wrote my cousin David. "I'm sorry I never stood up for you. Watching you succeed despite everything gives me hope for my own situation," messaged my younger cousin Lisa, who'd been dealing with her own toxic family dynamics. I was sitting in my real office, the one my family had never seen, reviewing the messages when my assistant knocked on the door. "Rebecca, Carlos Martinez is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal." I looked up from my computer screen. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown office, I could see the city stretching out below me. This was the view I'd worked 18-hour days to earn, the success I'd built while my family dismissed me as a failure. "Send him in," I said. Carlos walked into my office like he was entering a foreign country. His eyes swept over the mahogany desk, the awards on the walls, the expensive artwork I'd purchased from local artists. This was a side of my life he'd never imagined existed. "Nice place," he said awkwardly. "Thank you." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you?" He sat down heavily, and for the first time since we were children, I saw vulnerability in his face. "I came to apologize." "For what specifically?" For everything. For the years of putting you down. For not seeing who you really were. For letting Mom and Dad treat you like that." He ran his hands through his hair. "Rebecca, I had no idea you were building all this." "That's the point," I said calmly. "You had no idea because you never cared enough to ask. In 5 years of building Heritage Corporation, did you ever once ask me about my work? Did you ever inquire about my life beyond what you could see on the surface?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No, I didn't. Do you know why? Because I was selfish. Because it was easier to be the golden child when you were the scapegoat. Because..." He stopped, struggling with words he'd probably never said out loud before. Because I was jealous. That surprised me. Jealous of what? Of how strong you were. Even when we tore you down, you kept going. You never begged for our approval the way I begged for it my whole life. I've spent 34 years trying to earn Mom and Dad's love, and you just existed without needing it. I needed it, I corrected. I just learned to live without it when it became clear it came with conditions I couldn't meet. Carlos leaned forward. Can you teach me how to do that? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? How to exist without needing their approval? Because right now I'm sitting in this office, realizing that everything I thought I'd accomplished was because my sister was pulling strings behind the scenes. And I don't know who I am without their validation or your hidden help. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was genuine confusion and pain. You want to know the truth about your promotion? He nodded, bracing himself. You earned it. Every single advancement, every project success, every client win. That was you. I never interfered with performance evaluations or day-to-day operations. Thompson runs a merit-based company, and you succeeded because you're good at what you do. Relief flooded his features. Really, but here's what I did do. I created an environment where merit matters more than politics. I invested in training programs, improved company culture, and removed managers who played favorites. You succeeded because I built a system where people like you could thrive. People like me? Hard workers who deserved better than the toxic environment they were stuck in. I paused, letting that sink in. Sound familiar? He got it immediately. The parallel between his professional situation and our family dynamics was impossible to miss. So what happens now? He asked. That depends on what you want to happen. Do you want a relationship with your sister? Or do you want a relationship with the CEO of Heritage Corporation? I want my sister back. Then you're going to have to prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Consistently, over time, without expecting immediate forgiveness. He nodded solemnly. What about Mom and Dad? What about them? They're struggling with all this. Mom's been crying for 2 days. Dad keeps saying he doesn't understand how this happened. How what happened? How their daughter succeeded despite their best efforts to destroy her confidence. How someone they wrote off as worthless built something incredible. Or how their toxic behavior finally had consequences. Carlos winced. When you put it like that? That's how it is, Carlos. I'm not going to sugarcoat it anymore. For 20 years, I absorbed their criticism and tried to prove I was worthy of basic respect. I'm done with that. So you're cutting them off completely? I leaned back in my chair, considering the question I'd been wrestling with since leaving the party. I'm setting boundaries, real ones, with consequences. If they want a relationship with me, they're going to have to earn it. How? They can start by acknowledging the damage they've done, not minimizing it, not justifying it, not explaining it away, just acknowledging it. Then they can show me, through consistent actions, that they've changed. And if they don't, then I'll continue building my life without them. I've proven I can be successful and happy without their approval. I don't need them, Carlos, but if they want to be part of my life, they need to add value to it instead of subtracting from it. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Rebecca, your 2 p.m. is here early. Should I tell them to wait? I looked at Carlos. I need to get back to work. Running a $50 million company doesn't leave much time for family drama. He stood up. Can I call you sometime? Not about work, just to talk? You can, but Carlos. I waited until he met my eyes. Don't call me because you feel guilty. Don't call me because Mom and Dad told you to. Call me because you genuinely want to know your sister. Because I'm not going back to being the family scapegoat just to make everyone else comfortable. After he left, I sat in my office for a few minutes, processing the conversation. It was a start, but I'd learned not to trust words without actions. Carlos had spent 34 years following the family playbook of conditional love and toxic dynamics. Real change would take time, consistency, and a complete overhaul of how he related to people. My phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Rebecca, honey, we need to talk. This has all been a big misunderstanding. Please call me back. A misunderstanding. 20 years of emotional abuse distilled down to a simple misunderstanding. I deleted the message and got back to work. Over the next 2 weeks, I implemented what I privately called the new Rebecca protocol. It was a comprehensive boundary system designed to protect my energy while giving my family the opportunity to demonstrate real change. First, I hired a family therapist, not for family sessions, but for myself. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in adult children of narcissistic families, and our first session was revelatory. What you're describing is a classic scapegoat golden child dynamic, she explained. The family system requires someone to absorb all the dysfunction so everyone else can feel normal. You've been serving that function for decades. And now that I'm not available for that role, the system will either adapt or collapse. Some family members will rise to the challenge and develop healthier patterns. Others will double down on the dysfunction and try to force you back into your old role. How do I tell the difference? Actions over words, consistency over time, respect for your boundaries even when they're inconvenient. Armed with professional guidance, I created a structured approach to family interactions. No more spontaneous emotional conversations. No more accepting blame for other people's feelings. No more tolerating disrespect in the name of family loyalty. The results were immediate and telling. Mom called 16 times in 3 days, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that progressed from "we need to talk" to "how could you do this to us?" to "your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of your selfishness." I didn't return a single call. Dad showed up at my office building, demanding that security let him upstairs to straighten out this nonsense. When they refused, he waited in the lobby for 3 hours, then sent me an email calling me ungrateful and cruel. I forwarded the email to Dr. Chen and blocked his work address. But Carlos was different. He sent 1 text per week, not demanding my attention, not guilting me about family unity, just sharing small updates about his life and asking genuine questions about mine. When I mentioned in passing that I was speaking at a business conference, he asked if he could attend, not to network or gain anything professionally, but because he wanted to see me in my element. "I've never seen you give a presentation," he texted. "I'd like to understand this part of your life better." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. For the first time, a family member was showing interest in my world without expecting something in return. 3 weeks after the promotion party, I agreed to have coffee with Carlos. We met at a neutral location downtown, far from family territory. "How are Mom and Dad handling things?" I asked. "Not well," he admitted. "They keep expecting you to come crawling back, apologizing for embarrassing them. They don't understand that this isn't about money or business success. They think you're punishing them for not knowing you were rich." "And what do you think?" "I think you're protecting yourself from people who've never learned how to love without conditions, including me." I studied his face. "That's a pretty significant realization." "I've been in therapy," he said. "Individual therapy. Dr. Martinez recommended it after I told him I was having anxiety attacks about whether I deserved my job." "Dr. Martinez? My therapist? Yeah, I know the name thing is weird." He managed a small smile. "Anyway, he's helping me understand how growing up in our house affected me. How I learned to get love by putting other people down. How I competed with you instead of supporting you because I thought there was only enough approval for one of us." "And what have you learned?" "That I spent so much energy trying to be the perfect son that I never learned how to be a real person. That the reason I felt threatened by your success wasn't because it diminished mine, but because it proved that approval addiction isn't the only way to live." He paused, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "Rebecca, I don't want to be like them. I don't want to only value people for what they can do for me. I want to learn how to love people for who they are. That's going to require unlearning 34 years of programming. I know, and I might screw it up sometimes, but I want to try." I considered his words carefully. Everything Dr. Chen had taught me about recognizing genuine change was present in this conversation. Accountability without defensiveness, commitment to ongoing work, understanding that change is a process, not a destination. "Okay," I said finally, "we can try, but I need you to understand something. I'm not going back to being the family problem solver. I'm not going to manage Mom and Dad's emotions or explain my boundaries to them. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be separate from your relationship with them." "What does that mean practically?" "It means you don't report back to them about our conversations. You don't pressure me to forgive them or attend family events. You don't use our relationship as ammunition in family arguments. We build something new, just between us." He nodded. "I can do that." "And Carlos, if you slip back into old patterns, if you start putting me down to make yourself feel better, or if you try to manipulate me into fixing family problems that aren't mine, I'll walk away again, and next time I won't give you another chance." "Understood." 6 months later, I was standing in the conference room of Heritage Corporation, leading a quarterly board meeting when my assistant slipped me a note. "Family emergency call on line 3. My first instinct was to ignore it. I'd trained my family not to contact me during work hours unless someone was literally dying, but something in my assistant's expression made me pause. "Take a 15-minute break," I told the board. "I'll be right back." The call was from Carlos, and his voice was shaking. "Rebecca, Dad had a heart attack. He's in surgery now." I felt my world tilt slightly. Despite everything, despite the boundaries and the therapy, and the months of limited contact, he was still my father. "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's. Mom's here, and she's asking for you." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I walked back into the conference room, finished the meeting in 10 minutes instead of the planned hour, and drove to the hospital with my mind racing. This was the test Dr. Chen had warned me about. Crisis situations had a way of pulling people back into old patterns, and my family would expect me to drop everything and resume my role as the emotional caretaker. I found them in the cardiac surgery waiting room. Mom was crying in a corner chair, surrounded by relatives who'd appeared from nowhere. Carlos was pacing by the windows, his phone pressed to his ear as he talked to someone about work coverage. When Mom saw me, she immediately stood up and rushed over. "Rebecca, thank God you're here. I knew you'd come. I knew you still loved us despite everything." I let her hug me, but I didn't return the embrace with the desperation she was expecting. "How is he?" "The doctors say it was a massive heart attack, but they caught it in time. He's been in surgery for 3 hours." "What happened?" Mom's face crumpled. "He'd been having chest pains for weeks, but he refused to see a doctor. He said it was stress from work, from everything that's happened with the family. He blamed himself for driving you away." There it was, the manipulation I'd been expecting. The implication that my boundaries had caused Dad's heart attack, the guilt trip designed to make me abandon my self-protection and rush back into dysfunction. A year ago, it would have worked. I would have absorbed the guilt, apologized for protecting myself, and spent the next 6 months trying to prove I was a good daughter by accepting whatever treatment they dished out. But I'd learned something important in the past year. You can love someone and still maintain boundaries. You can care about someone's well-being without taking responsibility for their choices. "I'm sorry he was in pain," I said carefully, "but chest pains aren't caused by other people's boundary decisions. They're caused by medical conditions that require medical attention." Mom's expression shifted, and I could see her trying to recalibrate. "Of course, I just meant—" "I know what you meant." I sat down in the chair across from her. "Mom, I'm here because Dad is in surgery, and I care about him, but I'm not here to fix family problems or take responsibility for everyone's emotions. I'm here to support him through a medical crisis. But we need to talk about everything that's happened." "No, we don't. Not here, not now. Right now we focus on Dad's recovery." Carlos appeared at my elbow. "The surgeon wants to speak with family members. That includes you, Rebecca." We followed the surgeon to a private consultation room where Dr. Patel explained that Dad's surgery had been successful, but that he'd need significant lifestyle changes to prevent future cardiac events. "Stress reduction is crucial," she emphasized. "Mr. Martinez needs to eliminate unnecessary stress from his life and develop healthier coping mechanisms." Mom immediately looked at me. "See, I told you the family stress was affecting his health." Dr. Patel frowned. "Mrs. Martinez, when I say stress reduction, I'm referring to work-related stress, financial pressure, and untreated anxiety. Family stress typically comes from poor communication patterns and unrealistic expectations, not from family members setting healthy boundaries." I could have kissed that doctor. "The best thing you can do for your husband," Dr. Patel continued, "is encourage him to follow his medication regimen, attend cardiac rehabilitation, and consider counseling to develop better stress management skills." After the doctor left, we sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Carlos spoke up. "Mom, I think Dr. Patel is right. Dad's been carrying a lot of stress for years, and it's not because Rebecca set boundaries. It's because our family never learned how to handle conflict in healthy ways." Mom turned on him immediately. "Don't you start taking her side." "I'm not taking sides. Carlos interrupted. I'm stating facts. Dad's been having chest pains for weeks and refused medical attention. That's not Rebecca's fault. That's Dad making poor health decisions. I watched this exchange with fascination. Carlos was actually standing up to Mom's manipulation tactics. He was refusing to participate in the blame game. 6 months of therapy had apparently taught him to recognize toxic patterns when he saw them. I think, I said carefully, that we should focus on Dad's recovery right now. Everything else can wait. Mom opened her mouth to argue, but Carlos cut her off. Rebecca's right. Dad needs us to be calm and supportive, not dramatic and blame-focused. For the next 3 days, I visited Dad in the hospital every evening after work. I brought him books, helped him with his physical therapy exercises, and listened to him talk about his fears about mortality and health. We didn't discuss family drama. We didn't rehash old arguments. We simply existed together as father and daughter. It was the most peaceful time we'd spent together in decades. On the 4th day, as Dad was being discharged, he asked to speak with me privately. Rebecca, I owe you an apology. Dad, no, let me say this. I've had a lot of time to think, lying in that hospital bed, about the kind of father I've been, about the things I've said to you over the years. His voice cracked slightly. I was wrong about so many things. I sat down in the visitor's chair. What specifically? I called you a failure when you were building something incredible. I dismissed your dreams when I should have been supporting them. I let my own insecurities about success make me tear down your confidence. He looked out the window, and I turned your brother into a weapon against you by making him think love was a competition. These were the words I'd waited 32 years to hear. But instead of the overwhelming relief I'd expected, I felt something more complex, a mixture of gratitude, sadness, and caution. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. Is it too late to fix this? I considered the question seriously. That depends on what fixing this means to you. If it means going back to the way things were, then yes, it's too late. I'm not going back to being the family scapegoat. But if it means building something new, then we have a chance. But Dad, it's going to require more than an apology. It's going to require consistent changed behavior. It's going to mean respecting my boundaries, even when they're inconvenient. It's going to mean treating me with the same respect you'd give a stranger. He nodded slowly. I think I can do that. Don't think, no, because I won't survive another cycle of hope and disappointment. I know, he said firmly. Rebecca, you've built something extraordinary. You're successful, you're strong, and you did it all while we were actively working against you. I don't understand how you did it, but I respect the hell out of it. For the first time in my adult life, my father was seeing me clearly. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. A year later, I was sitting in my office reviewing Heritage Corporation's annual report when my assistant buzzed me. Rebecca, your family is here for lunch. I smiled and saved my document. Carlos and I had been having monthly lunch meetings for 8 months now. Not family obligation lunches, but genuine conversations between siblings who were learning to like each other as adults. Dad had joined us for the last 3 months, carefully respecting the boundaries we'd established and slowly earning his way back into my life. Mom was still struggling with the new family dynamics. She attended family therapy sessions sporadically, complained about my coldness to anyone who would listen, and occasionally tried to manipulate Carlos into pressuring me to forgive and forget. But she was no longer the center of my emotional universe, and her approval or disapproval had lost its power to destroy my peace. They knocked on my office door, and I gestured them in. Dad looked healthier than he had in years. The cardiac rehabilitation program had not only strengthened his heart, but also taught him stress management techniques that had improved his overall quality of life. Carlos was thriving in his role at Martinez Industries, having earned a promotion based entirely on merit and his own strategic thinking. "How's the quarterly report looking?" Carlos asked, settling into one of the leather chairs. "Excellent. We're up 23% from last year, and I'm considering acquiring 2 more companies in the tech sector." Dad whistled low. 23% growth in this economy is incredible. "It helps that I learned early how to succeed without support," I said with a slight smile. "Adversity builds resilience." Carlos laughed. "Are you ever going to let us live down being terrible to you?" "Probably not completely," I admitted, "but I'm willing to focus on who you're choosing to be now instead of who you used to be." As we headed out to lunch, I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. I'd gone from being the family disappointment to being someone they respected. I'd maintained my success while building healthier relationships. I'd learned that forgiveness didn't require forgetting, and that love didn't require accepting abuse. The woman they'd called a disgrace was exactly the woman I'd always been. The only difference was that now, finally, I had a family that could see her clearly. And more importantly, I no longer needed them to see her to know my worth.